Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, sleazy horror. I want to talk to you about the Witches series by James Darke. So these are definitely appropriate books to be talking about as we go into Garb August, because they are very trashy indeed. So The Witches is a series of 8 books published in the mid-80s in the UK, and I think they were only ever published in the UK. And I certainly remember the covers on the shelves of bookstores when I was a young lad heading into my teenage years. And when you see the covers, you will probably understand why. So these are very trashy historical horror novels. I think they owe a bit to Dennis Wheatley and people like that, so they kind of draw on his legacy, I think, to an extent. But they are definitely books that were published and have the feel of the kind of trashy paperbacks that were really big in the UK at that point, that included as a major selling point a lot of sex and violence. And these are books that came out around the time of the video nasty scare in the UK. So if you don't know what that is, it was a moral panic in the mid-80s where people suddenly became aware that there were all these weird and wonderful and often quite graphic horror movies from the States and Europe that were suddenly available on home video in the UK, and because of a loophole in the law were bypassing the film classification laws that films that were shown in cinemas had to go through. So things like Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, things like that. Zombie Flesh Eaters was another one that ended up on the video nasty list. So films that today we think of as being probably not that bad, and in some cases interesting examples of their genre, were banned outright on video in the UK as part of the Video Recordings Act that was brought in response to the video nasty scare. So books like The Witches ended up I think becoming more popular as a result of that, because people couldn't get the sex and violence they wanted on video, so they turned to paperbacks instead. And there were loads of books like this at the time. So James Darke, who is the man whose name is on the cover of these books, was actually a guy called Lawrence James, who wrote dozens and dozens of trashy paperbacks during that period. So as James Axler, he wrote a series called Deathlands, which I've read the first book of, which is kind of a sci-fi men's adventure type thing, which is certainly the first one was quite entertaining. He also wrote a load of biker novels, like Hell's Angels novels, under the name Mick Norman, and he wrote tons and tons of westerns as well. So a really prolific writer. But I think apart from Deathlands, maybe, I think this is probably the series that he's best known for. So I've only read the first of these so far. I read that a while ago, and I thought it was interesting enough to keep me reading and make me want to read more in the series. So it's set at the time of the English Civil War. You've got kind of witch hunters going around trying to find witches, and you've got a kind of muscular hero trying to kind of battle his way through that landscape, if you like. You've also got in the first book a black character, which I thought was really interesting, who's actually quite well handled. So that was something I wasn't expecting. But clearly the main purpose of these books is sex and violence. So there is a lot of that in there, and there is a lot of kind of torture of witches and things like that. So they are quite nice. They are quite sleazy, nasty books, but they are entertaining as well. And I think they have a reasonably important place in the history of British horror, because they are so representative of that kind of sleazier end of the paperback, the horror paperback boom that we had in the UK. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Let me actually show you the books. And warning, some of these covers are quite explicit. So the first one, as I say, is The Prisoner. So you've got a young lady there with kind of very 80s looking hair. Book 2 is The Trial. Book 3 is The Torture. Book 4 is The Escape. Book 5 is The Meeting. And book 6 is The Killing. So there are 2 more books in the series. So it's taken me a long time to assemble this collection of 6, because they only had, I think, a couple of print runs, and were only printed in the UK. They are quite hard to get hold of. I've had an eBay safe search going for these for absolutely ages, and it came up trumps last week, and I managed to get 5 of them for a really good price. So I already had a couple, and I've actually ended up with a couple of duplicates now. So yeah, really pleased with that. But there are 2 more that I need. So I need to get The Feud and The Plague, which are books 7 and 8, in order to complete my series. So yeah, some books today that are even trashier than most of the books I feature on the channel. So apologies if they weren't to your taste. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've read any of the Witches books. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.